It backyard cottages, or if you prefer to call them granny flats or garage apartments. You see, this little building, which is here in the back of this house. Now, what is a garage apartment or a granny flat? It's a bedroom that has gravitated from inside the house to become independent so that it can enter the rental market. See, this nation is full of unused bedrooms. There are millions of unused bedrooms all over, which cannot be rented because they would violate the privacy of the family. But if that bedroom were permitted to be separate like this and equipped with a small kitchen, not only could you rent to people at $200 or $300 a month, but that $200 or $300 would supplement the mortgage of the principal owner, which would in turn make it more affordable. And it's the best kind of affordable housing because it is integrated into the middle class, so that middle class norms of behavior are applied. It's not up to the police department to make sure that this person, keeps their stereo low or keeps the car parked in the right place. It's up to the principal landowner to do it. It's a self-policing, it's a privately policed system. This has been around since the very first settlements of America. Williamsburg is full of outbuildings. But now, and all the way till the 20s, the houses all had these. And now they're completely illegal. And planning departments zealously check to make sure that you can't slip in a kitchen anywhere, as if it were going to be the end of the world. What's happening is that people are afraid of lots becoming duplex lots. But that can be easily controlled by maintaining the maximum size to 400 square feet. Because if it's at 400 square feet, only a single person or a couple can live there, and it doesn't get into the children and all that overload that it implies. Outbuildings should not only be made legal, they should be encouraged. Now, 2 rules about how to provide affordable housing so that it doesn't turn into a slum. Rule number 1 is, it's got to look normal. Do not experiment on the poor. Architects love to experiment on the poor because the poor are presumed to be grateful to have a roof and a bathroom. And of course the middle class won't put up with it because they'll just go buy something that looks normal, so they experiment on the poor. But the problem is that the poor are already insecure enough about their social situation without looking like an architectural experiment. So they tend to trash the places that look funny. Why not provide affordable housing the way we used to? This is in Annapolis. Here, on this house is one of the great historic houses of Annapolis, a large place with a huge garden. This is a more middle-class house, and right next to them are 2 12-foot townhouses, 12 feet. But they look like the rest of the houses. They have decent materials, decent windows, decent door. It's just that they are smaller. Also, it is interspersed with the middle class. And that's the second rule. It is not enough to provide housing that looks normal. It is important that you provide it in very small increments interspersed with market rate housing. This is in St. Louis. St. Louis has undergone 2 generations of experiments in affordable housing. The first one was the high-rises, which of course were demolished in that very famous in the 70s. That was a failed experiment, so then they said, aha, we've learned the lesson. We won't put people in townhouses, we're going to put them in low-rise that looks normal. Which they did. Here it is. But this also turned into a slum. The problem is that they put 300 of these in one place. And all it takes is a couple of rotten apples, a couple of people selling drugs, a couple of cars that can't be maintained to have the whole thing degenerate. You can't put housing in large increments. It has to be scattered, even in small increments. I mean, especially in small increments. 2 affordable housing units like this are not going to destroy the real estate value of 10 or 20 houses around them. That's the only way it will survive. Any housing that you build on this pattern is really a wasted investment because it will go under and it will require maintenance and perhaps even demolition. How do you intersperse this housing? Because developers will tell you, well, we can't mix incomes, that'll never work, people don't like living with people of different incomes and so forth. Well, the reason they say that is that this is the pattern that they're thinking about. This is what we call a train wreck. Now, you're welcome, or planners are welcome to do housing as erratic as this one, site planning as erratic, if it weren't for one thing. And that is that these apartment buildings that are spinning wildly on their site are incapable of having a front and a back, the discipline of front and back. And it is that discipline of front and back that permits housing to be mixed. Take this aerial photograph here. This is where I live. This is Coral Gables in Florida, which is a development from the 1920s. It has the highest real estate values in South Florida, the second highest in all of Florida after Palm Beach. It's an open grid to the city. Okay, that has never been a problem, by the way, in expensive neighborhoods. You don't need to gate people off to have security, because all you need to do is make authentic neighborhoods. They take care of themselves. But that's not what I'm talking about here. What I want to talk about here is that within a very small geographical distance, which is to say, not, in fact, smaller than this pod here, Coral Gables manages to have an avenue that has 16-story office buildings and apartment buildings and hotels on both sides of this street. The next street over has apartment buildings of 2 and 3 stories, which is to say quite affordable housing. And the next street over has expensive single-family houses. How is this achieved? It's achieved because people relate to their front door. It's their address. It's their stoop. It's their street that means something to them. What happens behind them is of very little importance. Okay? That's why you get this. Now, this you normally don't see if you just drive around a city, because what you do is one day you drive down this street and you say, oh, what a nice street, single-family houses. And then, you know, the next day you drive down this one and say, aha, this is the apartment. And the next day you drive here and see something else. Only when you study aerial photographs do you see how often these uses are mixed in a back-to-back situation. Current planners don't do this anymore. They separate uses on the street, like this, which means you get completely asymmetrical conditions. High rises on one side, low rises on the other. That is a direct result of working with magic markers. Magic markers are too fat to do any planning with. It's too crude a tool. It's like a club. Use a pencil, use a pen. Because what you can do with a pen is actually make surgical interventions in terms of how to mix uses. For example, what's happening, the line is actually drawn here. These are duplexes facing each other. In our experience in planning, many irreconcilable problems can be addressed by surgical interventions. It doesn't have to be great big bubbles of single colors. If you do not have a front-to-back discipline, it is going to be very, very difficult to mix the incomes in the way that I'm proposing. By the way, and I'm not proposing that the jumps be this huge. You don't have to jump from high rises to apartment buildings. You can grade it down slowly from apartment buildings to townhouses to side yard houses to small lot single family to large lot single family. It can be graded imperceptibly. We've done that in all of our developments, and there has never been a marketing problem. Now, in the end, or rather, what I'm going to speak about in the next few slides is how to make a public realm that works for people. You know about this. Normally, I need to remind people with slides like this because you have downtown San Antonio. This is in Nantucket. This is a place that people enjoy being in public, meeting each other, etc. It is important for a sense of community that you have a public space. This kind of thing is all too rare in the new cities of suburban sprawl. There's very, very little community feeling. There's a place in Miami called Kendall that has a population of 160,000 people, and there was a kind of scandal. People were asked where they lived, and they didn't know. They didn't know that they existed. They didn't know where they were. There was a complete disorientation as to what community they belonged in. And this is a completely planned area built since the 1970s, all of planned unit developments. It's just astonishing. Now they all have an inferiority complex and so forth, and they're having these completely artificial parades in parking lots, you know, which have to be induced a la Rouse, you know, by egging people on instead of the natural, everyday meeting that takes place when you provide public space. Because in the end, what is important is providing what is called a sense of place. A public realm where you feel that it's okay to be there. Just to be there is okay. It feels okay.